Today is Tuesday, August 23rd, 2011. I'm interviewing William Gimignani at Canton, Connecticut. He was born on April 16, 1925 at Torrington, Connecticut. The interviewer is Sharon Capezza. Also present is the videographer Walter Kress. This interview is being conducted on behalf of the Canton Historical Museum and Central Connecticut State University as part of the Veterans History Project. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
And what branch of the service were you drafted into?
I was drafted actually into the Marine Corps. Actually, they gave me a choice, and they said Navy or the Marine Corps or the Army. And I wanted to join the Marine Corps when I was 17, but I have a hearing problem, and bad enough so that they didn't they rejected me. And then when I turned 18, I was drafted, and they gave me an opportunity to choose a service. And naturally, I was going to jump into the Marine Corps, and that's exactly what I did.
And where were you when you were enlisted in the Marine Corps? Where were you living?
Where was I living? I was living in Weathersfield.
And where did you go for training?
At Parris Island. I went to boot camp at Parris Island, and then Camp Pendleton, and after boot camp.
And what was that like?
Parris Island?
Sure.
I could tell you a million stories about Parris Island. It was, I would like to say that it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Being a young, smart aleck kind of kid, and a little crazy maybe, and if you talk to my teachers in school, they would tell you that. So the discipline that prevailed at the boot camp, Parris Island, was exactly what I needed, and I really got straightened out. But also it gave me a lot of pride and a lot of I can't express myself here, but anyway, it was a wonderful training, and it gave me confidence that lasted into my job when I returned home and got squared away with a job at the end of the war.
And
Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right.
What was Camp Pendleton like?
Well, we were treated a lot better. We were at Camp Pendleton. I was fortunate to be made a private first class out of boot camp, because I fired a sharpshooter, and that gave me a special privilege of being private first class, which was something for me at that point. Yeah.
Have you been a hunter before that?
Yes.
So
I
you were
was
familiar with rifles?
When I was 16, I went to a gun store and I bought a shotgun. You can't do that today.
For sure.
And I went out hunting, and I did a lot of hunting, and I did a lot of pheasant and bird shooting and rabbit shooting. Being Italian, we loved to have rabbit and polenta and all that kind of thing, and so I had a great time. Yeah.
So what was the focus of your training at Pendleton?
We were getting ready for an operation. We didn't know it at the time, and we didn't know that we were going to Iwo Jima until we were on board ship, because then we received a lot of briefing of what we had to do, and where we were going, and what to expect, and that kind of thing.
So from Pendleton, did you go directly to the ship?
From Camp Pendleton, we went directly to the ship. Yeah.
And where was that?
And San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you sailed to?
Yeah. Camp Pendleton is about somewhere around 25, 30 miles, 35 miles maybe, to San Diego, and that's where we shipped out. Yes.
And you sailed from San Diego to where?
To Hawaii. We landed in Pearl Harbor, and then we went to Camp Pendleton on the Big Island of Hawaii, in Camuella, and the name of the camp was this was right after the Battle of Tarawa, and that was a mean, bad battle, as probably as you know.
So you're in Hawaii now at Camp Tarawa.
Camp Tarawa, and on the Big Island of Hawaii, and
what was that like?
Oh, we were up in the mountains, and we did a lot of hiking and drilling, and all kinds of calisthenics and that kind of thing, and as much as I can remember, this is, don't forget, 65 years ago, you know. But it was strictly a lot of training and getting ready to go into battle. Of course, it was unknown to us where we were going at that point, and we didn't know where we were going until we were halfway over there on board ship. And
so then, from Camp Tarawa, where did you wind up going?
well, we went to San Diego to board ship with all our gear and our knapsacks and blanket and all that kind of thing. And we went on board ship. The name of the ship was the Talladega, and it was full of bed bugs.
Nice.
And so we did a lot of sleeping up on deck rather than down in the bunks down below, and where we were billeted.
What was the food like on shipboard?
Oh, it was very good. I can tell you another story at the end of at the end of the Battle of Iwo Jima, and we boarded ship. It was on, I'll never forget it, it was on April 1st, and it was Easter Sunday. And it was, we boarded ship, and when we went out to sea, we had our first hot meal. For 41 days we had K rations and C rations. And finally we got a real wonderful hot turkey dinner for Easter. We were celebrating Easter. That night, everybody, including the captain, had the runs. And if you can imagine, the toilet facility maybe had room for about 10 Marines, and we're hundreds of us there. And
that's such a great meal then.
Guys were sitting over the side of the ship and all over the place, and it was quite a mess. And I'll never forget that day. Yeah.
So when you left Hawaii, did you go directly to Iwo Jima?
We went to the Solomon Islands and to do some exercise over going down the ladder over the the ladder on the boat. It was a big, big net where every 4 or 5 guys could climb down and go into the boats that were going to take us into the island. And so we did a lot of that kind of thing. And then also it was an organization thing too. All the ships got together and they made their final, I think anyway, I presume that they were making a final who was going where, and of course we became, the 5th Marine Division became a part of the 3rd, what was it, my memory, the 3 divisions together, and it became a bigger unit, and so that had to be organized pretty well, and then from that point on we went towards Iwo Jima, and we were told exactly what was expected of us and what we were going to do. Yeah.
So what was that like, landing in Iwo Jima?
What was that again, Matt?
What was it like landing in Iwo Jima?
The Japanese allowed perhaps the 3rd, 4th wave to go in before they opened fire. Before that, we were behind the Navy with all their battle wagons and cruisers and their warships, I should say. And for 3 days, we were behind them for 3 days. Perhaps that would be February the 16th, because we went in on February 19th in 45. And so we watched. We watched the Navy pound the island, 7.5 square miles of into the island and into the trying to hit the pillboxes and whatever, and they just pounded that island like you wouldn't believe, and we watched that as something to do, you might say. But about 40 or 50 days before our landing, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, I presume it was the Marine Corps, and the Army Air Force pounded the hell out of that island. So you just can't imagine 40 or 50 days of bombing the island and also being pounded by the Navy, as they can do, that anything would be left or survive at that point. But we were in for a real tough battle, and to our surprise.
So you said they let the first couple of companies come ashore before?
Yeah, there were 4 or 5 waves of guys went in, and as they went in, everything was quiet. But then afterwards, at a certain point, they opened up fire, and you can imagine the bombardment from their guns from Mount Suribachi. And also mortars all over the place, and here we are bunched in together coming in. Okay. The place was inundated with pillboxes that were dug underneath the ground and connected with a network of tunnels all the way through, so that the Japanese could move out of the way of where the bombing was intense and go somewhere else, and then come back and probably catch us in a crossfire, and they could move around everywhere, anywhere they wanted to go on most of that island, because of the way they structured that. It must have taken them a long, long time, and they must have anticipated that we were coming in. and because we were 500 miles away from the Japanese, 500 or 600 miles away, and knew that that might be a central part for our troops to come in and then go on to Japan. And also we needed, because of the bombing of Japan itself, a lot of the big aircraft that went over would be damaged to the point where they needed to land. So it was 500 miles they could, and during the battle, while they were bombing Japan, there were planes that came in that had to make emergency landings in Iwo Jima. There were three landing fields, actually 2.5, two landing fields and one that was halfway done that they were working on. And we landed between Mount Suribachi and the first airfield, and that was our a place of attack, to get that airfield down. And
so how long did it take for you to be able to actually capture and secure the airfield?
I think we captured the airfield in about 4 or 5 days. I really don't know. I just can't remember. John Basilone, who was won the Medal of Honor for incredible deed on Guadalcanal, and he went home, got married, and joined our outfit because he wanted to. He could have sold war bonds, and that comes out in that movie, The Pacific. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That movie, yeah, The Pacific. And he was in our division, as well as 3 of the flag raisers, and he was killed the second day. And if you can imagine, he could have gone home, sell war bonds, and had a wonderful life at that point. After 12 or 13 days of intensive battles and being beat up and us beating them up, things started to quiet down. At night there were mortars flying all over the place, and every night we would try to sleep in our foxholes, which was quite a job to do, because there was nothing but sand, and the sand kept caving in on us. It was all black sand, and but there were flares that flared so that they could see all over the place where if anything was going on, and so that they could take care of it and use the flare light to see what was going on. And yet there were a lot of mortars being fired in all different directions, even after the 12 or 13 days. I found myself working in the ammunition dump, and towards the end of the battle, there was 125, 130 Japanese soldiers that came out and organized and came out and purposely bomb the ammunition dump, and they did a good job, because we had the whole ammunition dump went up on us, and there were a lot of people that were killed, of our people that were killed because of that situation. But that was probably the last organized situation by the Japanese get to us, you know. I don't know.
So, after the fight at Iwo Jima, what did you wind up doing?
After what?
After Iwo Jima, what was your next assignment?
Well, we finally got a bath, if you can. we went down to the beach and was able to jump in and get ourselves cleaned up, and let me tell you, we needed it. And but all we had was K rations and C rations at that point, and then when we went on board ship, I'll never forget, it was Easter Sundays, as we pulled out of there. I think it was a Saturday before Easter Sunday. We went on board, and we were looking forward to a good meal and everything else, and then I told you about what happened, and then we were on board ship, happy to be on board ship, going back to Hawaii after Iwo Jima. Going back to Hawaii was a pretty nice thing, and we pulled into Pearl Harbor. And as we pulled into Pearl Harbor, it was announced that Roosevelt passed away, and the president passed away, and so you know.
So
and then we went back to Camp Tarawa, and we got ready for the occupation of Japan.
So how long were you back in camp before you set sail for Japan?
Geez, I forgot. I was trying to figure out a date. We went on board. Of course, it took a long time for a ship to go over. Of course, we were halfway over there because of being on Hawaii, and but it took to get organized, and then we went to their islands, and every island we saw, you saw these big guns aiming at you, and and we were on board ship. And and then finally, and there was nobody when we landed in Sasebo. Actually, we had to make it through the islands, and we got into Sasebo, and then we took over some barracks that the Japanese soldiers had, and of course they were kind of beat up and all that kind of thing. But we made a go of it, and it was just like any service camp, but the meals were better, and the sake and the beer was wonderful.
I was going to say, did you get any hard time at all?
And the gooks, as we called them, they looked pretty too, So we managed to have a good time down there at that point, Jeez, it's embarrassing to talk like that, but.
And how long were you in Sasebo before you went on?
Well, we went in as a 5th Marine Division, and then it was at that point when we got there and we got organized and went to Sasebo. Then we took a train to Nagasaki.
And what was that like?
Oh yeah, well I got a couple of pictures of that. Everything was just blown out. We did some good things though. There was a Polish missionary, Catholic missionary, stationed there, and of course when we got there, the missionary took care of orphaned children that were orphaned because of the atomic bomb. And so we, of course, we were more organized. We had shipments coming in and boats coming in with supplies and everything else. We couldn't eat a thing. We didn't dare eat anything in Japan because because they used human waste for fertilizer and all that kind of thing, you know. And so I never went to a Japanese restaurant. I was there for 7 months, and we had to eat whatever the Navy or the Marine Corps gave us, you know, and which was good food, you know. They made sure that we were well taken care of, but we wouldn't dare eat Japanese food. At least I didn't, or I wouldn't eat it, you know. But we also were preached not to touch that food, you know, because of they can eat it, but we're not used to it, you know. And it's like going to it would be like going to Mexico and eating. I don't think anybody comes back from Mexico without being sick, you know.
So what were your duties when you were in Nagasaki?
We worked after everything quieted down. We worked in the dumps and the supply dumps, and you know, establishing that kind of thing, and unloading ship and that kind of thing. We were kept busy doing that because I was in the service company then, and a lot of the vehicles couldn't move on that island because of the deep ash from the volcano, where, you know, the very fine sand rather, and the ducks could move, and but that's how we from board ship. But some of the boats could come in. There were some deep shores that those boats could navigate, because the sailors down there, they were looking for souvenirs, you know. Hey, you got any souvenirs? They want a flag and everything else. We could have made a lot of money, you know. So there was a lot of those kind of things happening all over the place, you know. When you think back on it, you know, it was funny.
So where'd you go after Nagasaki? Where'd you go after Nagasaki?
We went back to Hawaii. And we, as I said, we pulled into Pearl Harbor, which is Oahu, and then finally we went on back to Hilo. That was the landing place for the Big Island, and then we cross over the island to back to Camp Tarawa, and we used to go swimming down in Hawaii, you know, but we were way up in the mountains. We had to take a truck down and go swimming and spend a day out there, and, you know, for a few days anyway. We had a good time. Yeah. At that time, there was a lot of space in between little towns, and there were towns that were very small that could not accommodate. Anyways, you know, there were hardly any bars or anything like that. It was, you know, nothing there. You might as well have been in on another island with nothing, you know. And but to go on Liberty, you had to go to Hilo or a couple of the big towns that were noted for going in and having a good time, whatever. But Hawaii, the Oahu, you know, that's the place where you had a good time, you know, because it was almost like New York, being a little New York with all the doings going on, you know.
So, while you were there, were you communicating with your family back home at all?
Was I what?
Were you communicating with family back
home? Oh yeah,
writing letters?
We didn't get our mail. It was a long time that my mom didn't know where we were. There was a long time. We didn't know where we were going, and certainly they didn't know where we were going. And all our mail, as you can see, was censored, and then it was typed up. Everything was censored and typed up by the Red Cross. And so my mother got all the mail that I didn't write for a long period of time, got it all at once. So she didn't know what was going on at that point. Yeah.
And did you find that you felt a lot of pressure or stress while you were in the service, or?
Oh yeah, I was scared, man. When you came in on that island, and of course we were being fired on in the wave that I came in, which was after the 5 or 6 waves come in. You know, then we came in. You know, then that's where we were getting exposed to a lot of fire. You know, being shot at and all that kind of thing.
And did you stay in touch with any of your buddies from your platoon when you were in the Marines?
I had one friend. I got letters over here. He was Pear. His name was Pear. He was a Frenchman from Maine. That's the guy that I saw. I got pictures of that. And he was the one that joined the Army after he was hit, and he got better, and they wouldn't. And he was a sergeant, and he wanted to go back to the Marine Corps after he became able, and the Marines wouldn't give him his old rank back because you know, they were cutting back on the forces then. You know, so he joins the Army and goes to the Philippines and marries a gal over there and has 6 children with her, and he lost her, and he married another lady who had 6 children. He was quite a guy, yeah, and very active, and he's the guy that goes to all the different gatherings and everything else all over Florida or wherever the Marines are having a get together, you know.
Did you ever
one organization, huh?
Did you ever attend?
No, I never. No, I was too busy working and just didn't have time for it, you know. And I kind of regretted not, because I had a lot of buddies that I would have loved to have been in contact with. I saw a few down through the years, but some of the guys that I was really close with, you know. We had a lot of fun in the service, you know, kidding one another. The older guys were Bing Crosby fans, and us young guys were Frank Sinatra, you know. So we used to have a, you know, back and forth on that kind of thing, you know. It was funny.
Did you get to go to any of the USO shows?
Do what?
Did you get to see any of the USO shows?
Oh, well, yeah, in Camp Pendleton, Tyrone Power joined the Marine Corps, and Bob Crosby joined the Marine Corps, and he was in Camp Pendleton, and so he was responsible for having Bing Crosby and the Marx Brothers and Bob Hope and a whole pile of people come down and entertain us. And when we were in Camp Pendleton, that was a great great time. Yeah. But they used to come up. They were very active, and people from Hollywood were very active in that. About 70. And of course, we go to Los Angeles, 72, 73 miles. We used to hitchhike and do all that kind of stuff, you know. And one guy would run a hotel room, and about 6 of us, one guy would be in the bathtub with making a bed out of the bathtub, you know. The other thing that in our time and was so different. Oh, there's a couple of stories I gotta say. Now I was making $52 a week, a month, and even though that was a lot of money, you know, I was saving money and everything else, and to go on Liberty, and we go into a bar or something, you could never buy a drink. The guys, somebody was always there to buy a drink for you or whatever, and you know, that kind of thing. And one time before we went overseas, a lot of us had a 10-day or 15-day leave. We had it coming to us, and I came all the way to Connecticut, and and all I had was enough money to buy a ticket, and I had $6. And in those days, you took the train, and it was a 3.5-day trip. You go to, if you took the northern route, you went to Chicago, or you took the central route, or whatever, and so you didn't have any money. And we stopped at Consul Buffs. Well, what state is it? They did a big story on this on 60 Minutes one time. I had to. The whole town, the railroad station would come in, and that would be a stop. Everybody would get off, and all the service guys were ushered into the big station, you know. And the women and everybody had stacks of chicken and all kinds of food and cake and everything else. And that was, you know, that was halfway home, so to speak, you know. And they allowed us to take a box and fill it up with cookies and chicken and everything else, and the whole town. I mean, they furnished it, you know. Didn't cost us a nickel, you know. Didn't cost us anything, and it was just, here was this oasis out here, and it was just beautiful. And on the way back, we hit the same thing, you know. So we got a, you know, real good meal, and it was a godsend at that point, you know, particularly coming back, you know, coming out. And they were 60 Minutes did a whole story about this. But anybody that went through the central part of on a trip, service guy was taken care of at Consul Buffs, you know. It was something else, and they were well recognized for being so generous to the service guys, you know. But then you get the other end, and I feel sorry for the guys who were in Vietnam. You had people spitting on them. You had that was the hippie. See, I talk about hate and whatever. I can't deal with. I don't mean, I'm talking about the real hippie movement. You know, the leftists all the way down. You know, and even today, and say in San Francisco, they don't want their schools to have what's the college where they allow service guys to go? What do they call it? ROTC. They don't want the ROTC to be in the colleges, you know. And I get a little angry at that kind of thinking or whatever, you know. But am I being?
Yes, you are. So now tell me about what it was like when you got home from the service.
We went to, from San Diego, we came into San Diego, and then we took a train ride to Bainbridge, Maryland, which was a Navy station. And we got our discharge there. And we stayed over, I think it was a college. There was a place there for us to stay over, and then we got our money and all that kind of thing. And then we got what they call a lame duck. I think I got my blouse. The lame duck was a picture of a bird, a golden, that was sewn on the blouse, so that because we were out of the service, and so that the lame duck shows that we could wear our clothes home and keep them and legally, so to speak, you know. And
I never knew what that term meant before. I never knew what a lame duck was before.
yeah, you want me to show it to you? I think I can get a hold of it.
Why don't we finish up here first, and then you can show me that afterwards.
Okay, all right.
So you came back, and did you go right to work?
That was the war ended, and we were in, and it was, of course, the war ended when Japan surrendered, and that was before we went into as occupation forces. So, the young guys like myself, we had to stay longer, and the married, particularly if you had children or whatever, they sent them home as soon as possible. So I had to stay there for 7 months. I liked it, actually. I was having a great time. But everything quieted down. All the you know, it was peacetime. The need for airplanes and the need for ammunition and guns and Colts and everybody else. You know, in other words, there was hardly any work, and all the guys that came in home, you know, took over all the jobs by the time we got there, you know. But what saved us was Veterans Administration, and we were able to go to school and finish up some school that I needed and all that. So I spent about 1.5 years going to school, and at that time it was what they call the only time I ever took welfare was what they call the 52-20 club. For a whole year, you got $20 a week, which was good. Do you remember? So you went to college, and that was paid for. And I took up accounting, but I didn't quite like it, you know. And it took a long time, and I finally got a job. I wanted to join the state police. And I went down to the state, and there wasn't I took the exam, and I passed the exam. And so somebody was there. He says, "Hey," he says, "you know, you can't get into the state police." He says, "But the corrections will take you." I said, "Oh." So I went down and I talked to Leonard Comstock, who was a major in the state police, and he got this plum job as being a warden over in Cheshire. Now I got curly hair, and you know, you'll see some pictures over there. I look like a young kid, you know. But I was 20. That was in 1947. I mean, yeah, 1947. I finally got a job, and that was the best thing I ever did because I loved the work, and I became a lieutenant and a captain and in charge of training and a lot of good things, and finally a deputy warden in Cheshire. And everything that I was taught, discipline and all this kind of thing, really came into handy, particularly in the training, because I used a lot of methods that we were you know, part of, and we ran a pretty good training program. I was able to talk better than that in those days.
So, do you think your military experience then affected the way that you operated?
Oh, it was the greatest. Oh yes, it was great.
And
and also the experience that the guys had, and most of the guys that I worked with at Cheshire were all Second World War vets, and so being a correction officer and that job, we had a lot of fun with the inmates. You know what I mean? We were more we could take anything. You know, we could take a little guff from them or whatever. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is the greatest generation, as it was known as, we were the best at that time. Corrections and the methods of corrections were condemned by the hippies again. All right. And they didn't realize what we were doing, even though the institution was old, and there was a typical jail with bars and formation and lines and all that kind of thing. But we could handle anything, you know. We could deal with anything, you know. If a guy got wise, and we had riots and we had a few things like that, and we did a good job. But somehow, some way, there was a rapport because of our service time and the way we operated. There was a rapport there, and there was a lot of good things that were happening, but they could not. But the do-gooders, as I call them, could not see that. They could not see that we were, you know, whatever. I could tell you a lot of stories about that if you. We had a professor. When I was in the training division, we took over this jail, the Haddam jail, and we used to do our training. We used to lock up guys to see what it was like to be, you know, we locked them up for 3 days, you know, and treated them like the old prisons treated people, you know, and it was famous because nobody else ever did that, you know, but it was because of our service time and everything else that gave us the extra knowledge to do certain things, you know.
So is there anything else that you want to add about your military service or any topic really that we haven't covered in the interview?
Yeah, I think Truman saved our lives. I think because in our situation anyway, and the Veterans Administration did a real big job. They really, I mean, there was a lot of people, a lot of guys who took advantage of Veterans Administration, who got education. My brother got 4 years of college and became a certified engineer, electrical engineer, and went on to big things with that. And I went up in rank, and even though it was a corrections job, I was a deputy warden at Cheshire. That meant 600 inmates and about 140 staff, and I was in charge of discipline and everything else at that time, you know. So it did me good, and it straightened me out too in many ways. I probably might have matured into it anyway, but that pushed me a little bit, you know. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
Yeah, that was the greatest thing. That was the greatest experience, but I was lucky. God blessed in many ways. And I remember knocking on God's door there a few times, you know.
Well, we thank you for your service and for doing this interview with us. It's been great.
Oh, I hope so. I wish I was more